Right, hello and welcome to my video. My voice is back enough to actually make a video. Last week it really sounded terrible, but it's slightly better now. This is a smaller painting than normal. It's 40 centimeters deep, which means it's probably 60 wide, it is. And I'll put that on the screen about now in inches. I should remember it by now, but I'm old, so I've forgotten. And I have a student with me, Sue, who popped over from California. Obviously nothing better to do. And if you want, you can come round and stand there if you prefer, or you can stay there. Okay. And what I'm going to do, it's just like a standard composition that I have done many times before. Although at the moment I'm fiddling with my palette and looking at compositions that I could do, and I've found one that actually is quite nice. So what I'll, at the end of the video, maybe, I'll video a little shot of my palette to give you an idea what I'm talking about. There is a video where I show this, where you just use the paint on a glass palette and you make shapes and compositions, and you can plan your painting that way, and then if it looks nice, you just copy it onto whatever you're painting, which in this case is plywood. And I know people will ask, it's called a kumi. I'll put it in the information box below. It's an African mahogany. It's pale coloured. I mean, this is white because I've got gesso on it, but it's what they call, I think in France they call it blonde wood. It's quite a pale wood. Don't use pine because it'll fall apart. So I've got a standard composition that I've done before, and that is quite a low horizon, like so. And don't worry about what you do at this stage. All you're doing is applying paint to a surface. Think of it that way. If you're painting a landscape and it doesn't look right, then you've failed with your landscape. But if you're just applying colour, nobody really cares what it looks like. And what would be the point of caring? Because it could go wrong. So I'm just going to make a quick change to this, even at this stage of the painting. I'm just deferring this brush here because it's a little bit erratic, sending bristles everywhere. And also, as usual, I'll be using paper from this discreet little roll of kitchen paper, or paper towel. I've actually had people say that I've confused them sometimes by saying kitchen paper, but it is paper that you use in the kitchen. That's the way I think the English might think of it. But I'm learning the American way, and it is paper towel, I suppose. So what I want to do is just take away a little bit of paint in the middle here. It doesn't matter what happens when I do that, because all I want to do is add a little bit of pure red ochre, with oil obviously, because I want this colour in the middle. So I'm just going to splash that on there. Well, not exactly splash, carefully apply, because I didn't quite have enough in the green. These colours really work well together, and you can get all kinds of nice effects without worrying about how you're putting the paint on, because as I've said many times, I'm not painting a door or a wall. What I'm trying to do is make an interesting painting. So don't worry about them mixing together, because they will. And if anyone says to you, by the way, if when you're painting, some art teachers might say, "Oh, you must never mix on the painting." This is complete balderdash, because who cares where it's mixed, so long as you get the result. I think things are changing a bit now, though, because you see, I'm so old that when I was at college, if you did that, you didn't just get told off by the tutors, you were publicly flogged outside the building, usually on the coldest day they could find, just to make sure you didn't forget that little point about not mixing on the canvas. So people are more tolerant now, and let's face it, there are far more serious things than where you mix your paint. So there's, just to get me started on the actual land, and I'm going to put a tone in the sky. In fact, I wonder whether to have a red tone generally. I suppose I could. As you know, you see, when you're painting a picture, particularly something like this, which is mostly, I suppose, from my memory, so I'm sort of making it up as I go along. It doesn't matter what I do. That's another way of looking at painting, is that if you paint something from your mind, nobody can actually say it's wrong, because nobody knows what's in your mind. So I'm going to do this, it's going to be quite a monotone type of painting. And as the paints are mixed together here, it starts to get interesting. Now, I'm quite well aware that there will be people watching that and saying that if you find that interesting, you need to get out more. Well, I've been out more, and this is much more interesting. So I'll continue to do it this way. So what I mean by interesting is how the colours actually start to run into each other. And even though it's just a little thing at the moment, for instance, if you can see on here, there's some light spots showing through the paint. That's not an error, it's an accident. Now, because it's the sort of accident I want to keep, I'll leave it. And I'll find a use for that later. And the sky, okay, so this is not a blue sky. It might have some blue in it eventually, but not in this sitting. So this might be in two parts. And all I want is a tone. So again, here, obviously when I'm working to the land, I would have the brush that way, not this way. If I have the brush that way, I can't see what's going on behind it. I want to actually be, and it pains me to say this word, precise. I just need that to just stop on the green. Like so. You notice I'm not doing this, and as you can see, there's not a lot of paint coming off that. But if I do this, I can get colour from the brush. But I want it to just come up to the land with a little bit of crossover. So once that's on, I can then get some more paper. And start to smudge it a little bit. Now, this colour, as you can see, is a reddish, oh that's nice, I like that. A reddish colour, it's probably very red, it looks very red on my camera viewfinder, but it's something to work into. Now, because the trees on the left-hand side are probably only going to go to about here, which means I've got to just add a little bit more red. Up here. So, even though I will probably add blue to this, as I said, late, in another sitting, what I want to do is, with this tone, is make it as interesting as possible. And I can sort of plan roughly where I'm going to put clouds by just taking a little bit more paint off. See, if I do that, I go back to the board. So if I do that a few times, being careful not to make any repeat patterns, I can give a sort of impression of some clouds for later. It's going to be quite subtle, this, and I'm only concentrating here because there will be trees over that bit. This part here is just going to be sort of flat landscape with the odd sort of hump or bump. But this is the important bit. I suppose I could start to rub in a little bit of blue there, but I'm not going to on this one, because I want to treat that as a separate lesson. So going back to the sap green, so again it's exactly the same colour, sap green and red ochre with a little bit of oil in there, not much. I never want it so that the paint flies off the brush. It does sometimes accidentally, but if I have a brush here and I waggle it at the sky, you can see there's nothing coming off onto the board. I'm so pleased that worked, because there was a video recently that I did where I did that and I said, look, nothing comes off, and guess what? It came off. Not only did it come off on here, it came off on, I think it was the cat. For several days I was wandering around trying to figure out where the cat had gone and what had replaced it and why is it green. But anyway, back to the landscape. So trees. Okay, trees are dead easy. You want your tree to have movement, so you've got to paint it with a bit of movement. And don't do this. Oh, I'm going to paint a tree. Here's a trunk. There's some branches. There's some more branches there. There's a few more here. No, you've got to forget that, because you will end up with a very stiff, quite boring looking tree. Don't worry about what's actually holding the head of the tree up. You can add that later. So think of the tree without any trunks, just the actual mass of leaves. And again, I think I did this again, well, I always do this. So I've got the brush like that, just holding it in my hand, and I literally waggle my finger and the brush goes onto automatic, and you can get some very interesting tree shapes. And you can move in and out just to regulate the amount of pressure that you have where it hits the board. A little tip for painting in tonalism is that it's always better to soften the tops of trees. If you do that, that'll give the appearance of effect, rather not appearance, well, I suppose both, of wind moving the tree and also light coming through the tree. Like here it's darker, not so much light coming through. Here it's lighter, so light is coming through, or it's reflecting onto it. Doesn't matter which, as long as it works. So now I'm going to work on the land below the trees. Same sort of technique, because I don't want to spend any time painting blades of grass. It is literally like watching grass grow, where it's much more interesting to watch paint dry. Okay, so I've got to start thinking now about composition. Is that a bit small and mean? Are they a bit too twee? I think they are, but I'm not going to do anything. If anything, I'll have maybe this tree here taller, but I won't do that until I've actually figured out what's going to happen to the sky. So below those trees, I'm going to have a sort of dark area, so that then I can do this thing where the land sinks away a little bit, but it needs to start off dark. And I'll tell you what I'll do very quickly before I get down there, is I'll use one of my riggers. I went to the shop the other day, and this is for the rigger freaks. Have you ever seen such a nice bunch of fresh riggers, all waiting for me to ruin? Although I'll try not to. Okay, so it's the same colour as the trunk, and all I'm going to do is connect the top of the tree to the ground. And the thing about that is I use gravity. Now, rather than have to do this and lean my hand on something and paint upwards, it's much easier to paint down, because your arm wants to drop anyway, so just control it as it goes down. Make your tree trunks interesting. So let's have one there. Let's have one that's really at a bit of an angle. Why not? Let's have another one there, like so. This is a very simple painting. I'll try to make everything look fiddly and complex in a minute. But this is just, I suppose this is a little bit painting 101. Let's have another thin one there. So now, it could have been interesting if I had upright tree trunks. Personally, I think it's more interesting to have them at different angles. It's just sort of more natural. And in a moment, I'll be adding all kinds of foliage and stuff in there. So then, as the image goes across the painting, what I want to do is get a little bit of a smudgy effect in the middle. So I'm going to just soften this bit. Now this will help build up perspective. This will start to come towards you a bit, whereas what's in there will move away. And then over here, I think we'll go for a bit of contrast there. I don't think I did much in the original, but it should be interesting. I might put a bit of Payne's grey in the sky in a moment, but as usual, my mind jumps about all over the place when I'm doing this. But that's one of the things that makes a painting interesting, is having the ability to change your mind and don't worry about the consequences. Because, you know, it's just a painting. If I don't like these tree trunks, I still can get a bit of paper and just wipe through there. And I might do that in a minute, just to prove my point. So let's see if we can sculpt the land a bit. And as I think I might have said a few minutes ago, just make marks to see what you can get away with. People, my last video, if you've seen it, people have mentioned that the time lapse, I think, is okay every now and then, but it's not something I'll be making a habit of. I did that out of desperation, because I want to get my, let's be honest, I want to get my views up on YouTube, and because I've been a little bit unwell, if you don't regularly upload videos, YouTube stops promoting you. And they stopped promoting me a little bit. Last November I was in hospital and I didn't do anything for, well, certainly for 9 days. And then when I came out, I didn't feel like doing anything at all for probably a month, I think. And yeah, so they, as I said, they stopped promoting. And then you have to catch up. So I'm still trying to catch up. And I think it's nearly 8 months since I was in hospital. So I'm now getting a bit of energy back. And I can actually get on with doing a bit of work. So yeah, I've just got to keep working at it and produce as many videos as possible. And just try and get my popularity back after my illness. So as you can see here, I'm building up textures in the foreground because you have to remember, if you're going to paint a tonalist landscape, it doesn't actually matter whether you're painting a detailed landscape, but you know, nature is unbelievably untidy. And I know I've said this before, but the only tidy bit of nature, if you're a gardener, that you'll come in contact with is probably your garden. Nature doesn't get mowed much. Farmland does, but places like this, which is the middle of nowhere, this is the nowhere part of my mind, it doesn't get mowed, it just does its own thing. So you've got to try and emulate that as successfully as you can. I might add water to this one, by the way. I'm not sure yet. we'll see how it goes. But I don't necessarily want to do what every tonalist does. It seems that, you know, there is this formula where you have sky, vegetables, water. I don't, as I said, I don't particularly want to do that. It's not that I'm special. Someone accused me of being special once. It's just that I just like to break the mould a bit. Now over there, I'm not totally happy with that bit yet, so I'm going to, I think, the original that I'm sort of emulating is on my computer screen next to me, so I can sort of check it, but I just don't like that. So I'm going to actually put a hill there, with trees on the top, in the distance, coming across there. And a few bumps. They're just bumps, you see, they're not necessarily trees. They only become trees when they look like trees. Until I hit treedom, they're bumps. So at the moment I'm in a state of bumpton, and I'm heading towards treedom. I can't get through a day at least without trying to invent some kind of weird word. But, let me know if I'm being embarrassing. Okay, so now we've got a hill over on the right hand side. It's sort of okay. It might do, we'll see. So, and I think I'm going to, now this, I have to point out something. This is the part of a painting where I've been painting for the last few minutes. I don't know how long we're in, how far into the video we are, but I don't know, 15, 20 minutes maybe. Although my concept of time is quite bizarre sometimes. How long have we been going? I don't know. Yeah, it's probably 20 minutes. And I get to the point where I then start to experiment. Now, a lot of this here, I've done in a certain way because I have a student here, and it's always a good thing to show someone how to do, or how I do certain things. It's up to the person watching whether they decide to actually adopt that method. It's not for everyone, but it just happens to be the way I work. So now, once I've got the trees on there, I want to start making it look a little bit more mysterious. So what I'm going to do is just sort of just play with it a bit. And in fact here, I'm going to make a little slight change there. I'm going to bring this tree right down to the ground. So it stops being a tree, and that turns into a, I don't know, maybe it turns into a bush. And the reason I'm doing that will become clear in a second. So bear in mind also what you're seeing here is all done with just two colours at the moment, sap green, red ochre. And I want to get some darkness at the bottom of this tree. And the reason I want that is because I've got some dark tree trunks here, but I want some light ones. And the only way I can show light tree trunks, well, I could just put a light tree trunk in there, but it's much more effective if the light tree trunk is against a dark background. So this is where we say goodbye to the brush and use a piece of paper. So as usual, piece of kitchen paper or paper towel. Make it into a taper, really screw it up as hard as you can, because you don't particularly want it to fall apart. Now this could be a problem, all this down here. That's easily solved by doing that. Okay, so that bottom bit won't dangle on your painting anymore. And then we can put in a few light, thin tree trunks. Isn't it strange how when people are concentrating, they put a full stop between every word. I'll try and talk normally. So anyway, yeah, there's some tree trunks. In fact, I think I'll put one there, like so. Okay. They're a little bit regular, slightly too evenly spaced. It may sound like a bit of a joke, but it is a battle to keep randomness. I'm going to lose that one. Keep the one on the end. No, I don't like the one on the end, so I'm going to do that one again. And in fact, what I'm going to do, I won't do anything above it until I establish the sky. But here, I'll just send the tree over that way a little bit. So I'm breaking up the edge. You don't want the edge too hard. Okay, so now back to the tree trunk maker, which has possibly had it. So I'll make another one. And I'm going to just put in a random tree trunk because, as I said earlier, they don't always necessarily grow upright. Sometimes you get one that is just a rebel, goes off at a jaunty little angle. So there we are. It doesn't have to be complete either. It can break up. In fact, it's better if it is broken up because that gives the feeling of foliage in front of the tree trunk. And then just do a few over here. I'm hoping you can see that. I think you can. Now, this one here is quite long and willowy, so I'm going to cover it in a few places, as I said, so that it gives the feeling of foliage in front of it as well as behind it, like that. And of course, the odd one or two may come up higher than the others. I won't do that much, but I'll just explain what I'm doing. In other words, one or two might just break through like so, but I'm not going to do much until I sort the sky out, but that's the effect I'm after. Now that I'm looking at that, I want to go back to the ground below the trees. So I think we'll take away a little bit of the soil. When you're doing things like this, where the ground is literally subsiding, it doesn't matter about the bottom edge, just work on the top edge, because the bottom edge you can resolve in a moment. So let's just have a few shapes like that. Obviously the harder I rub on it, the more paint comes off. Okay, now the bottom edge, scumble it. Great word that, I love the word scumble. But scumble erratically. Everything should be erratic. I don't mean in life generally, but in a painting. And then, even though there's exactly the same amount of paint on the brush to get that little dark effect there, I know that if I move sideways quickly, I can take paint off, like so. And I might do a bit of whipping grass. That seems to be popular. Possibly over that side. So there's some dark grass. I mean, it probably doesn't need to be whipped. You'll know what I mean when I start whipping it. But because the bristles going through the oil gives you that sort of instant grass effect, but I'll just do the odd one or two. The more that you can get done at this stage with all these textures, the better, because when you go back to work on the painting, when it's dry and you start to add glazes or whatever, you know, this will be the underdrawing. So if the glazing goes wrong, you can just wipe back, obviously. I always say this, don't I? Let's have a little bit of light over there. Right, slight change of mind with the sky. I'm going to put on some Payne's Grey, which is what this is. Now that's obviously very, very pale. I've added a bit of oil to that. Well, a bit is an understatement, quite a lot. If I just take some Payne's Grey pretty well straight from the tube, it doesn't matter, it'll be really dark, but what I can do is I can quickly construct roughly what I'm going to do with the sky, and I think it's going to be something like that sort of shape. Now a lot of people, when they're painting a sky, will start with a bit of blue, usually darker blue down to lighter blue. That's one way of doing it, it's just not my way of doing it. My way is, I think, possibly a bit bizarre, but it does work. And as you can see, just by doing this, I mean, who says a sky has to be white fluffy clouds anyway? It can be dark fluffy clouds, and I find that much more interesting. Again, I always say this, you've got to keep the randomness. Clouds generally, although I have been proved wrong in one or two cases, but generally clouds don't have much symmetry. There are certain types of high altitude clouds where you just get like bars on the sky, like so. This is not one of them. This is just going to be slightly stormy, and I'm toying with the idea of putting a little bit of blue in this, but maybe not. I'll see what I can do without. So let's just put on the darks for the grey and let that mingle a bit with the red colour. And again, as you know, as I've often said, just get to the point in the painting where you start to sort of play and see what happens. So I'm going to just get some white. There we go. Oh, no, we don't go. Okay, so I guess most of you are quite sharp-eyed and you might have noticed something. Where did that sky come from? Well, it's me being a bit of a dingbat. I must have pressed the button on the camera incorrectly and basically went to turn it on, but actually turned it off. Or I turned it on, then off. I think that's the only thing I can conclude. So what I'm going to do now, so you don't miss out on a sky, that is of course if you're even here now, you might not be, you might have gone. But if you are here, you're going to get to see how I will fix this sky. And well, actually, I say fix it, but what I mean by that is rearrange it. So the first thing I need to do is just to take the tops off these trees. I don't have to take the whole tree away, or trees away, all of them. I just need to sort of remove a little bit of the green, which, funnily enough, it's actually drying quite well there. So maybe I won't need to worry. I can probably get it to show through the paint. So this has turned into a little bit of a lesson on how to not get worried if you do ruin something, because you can always fix it. And that's the first stage. Highly complex. It's called wiping it off. And there it is. As much as I can get off is wiped. So there we are. And then I'll start to put the sky back on, or a version of the sky, as I said. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off with a bit of dark. So I'm going to use Payne's Grey. I'm not going to put any blue in there. It's quite a neutral sort of grey. It's not too dark. And off we go. So let's just see what we can do, just to make it sort of a little bit exciting. So I actually quite like dark sky behind trees, because then you can bring out the lights of the trees against the sky. Or am I just saying that to make it up as I go along? Well, we'll see in a minute. Probably be okay. The thing is not to worry about it. So let's just basically mush it up. Have a nice curly bit there, I think. So these little bits there, I mean, you can probably figure out how I put those in. I used a palette knife and then smoothed it out. So what I'm going to do is see how dry that is. Maybe take them off just a little bit. There we are. Vast improvement. And see if we can make it into more of a vast improvement. Let's see. Now, I've put scrape marks through there, which obviously I don't want them to show, so if I just go over it with a circular motion. If I wipe, you'll get wipe marks. If I do a circular motion, you'll lose the marks. It's the first stage of smoothing out your sky, really. Quite a useful little trick, that. While I'm here, I'd like to say thank you to some recent Patreon members. The last I think 2 or 3 people. You know who you are, you've been very generous, so thank you for that. If you do want to send donations, which all go to basically me staying alive and feeding me and my cat, I haven't quite got enough money for the condo in Bermuda, but I'm working on it. So yeah, thanks very much for those of you who've donated. It means a lot to me. And you, of course, if you do donate like that, you get free Zoom access to Zoom lessons, absolutely free, for as long as you keep giving me a nudge or I remember. There's similar activities, but it's probably better to give me a nudge every now and then as the lessons are approaching, and then I'll keep sending you links. So, right, now then, so I sort of flattened the sky a little bit there. And again, this is still a bit of a mess here. So I'm going to zoom in on that in a second so you can actually see what I'm going to do to it to fix it. So I think that's probably close enough. And I'm using sap green and red ochre, as usual. I wonder whether people get fed up with me saying that, because it's something I say in almost every video, sap green and red ochre. I suppose it could get irritating, but it just happens to be the colours that I use at this stage of a painting, and I don't think it hurts to remind people of that. You could always put me on mute and just read the notes in the box below, but you never know, you might miss something. So anyway, trees. So I'm not going to put any light here. So I think I'll rebuild the trees, which of course will only take seconds. But I'm going to make them a little bit more flirty. Is that a flirty tree? Let me check with my student. Is that flirty?
Very flirty.
It's flirty? Yeah, definitely a flirtatious bunch of leaves. So there we are, we get another crack at trees, slightly bigger than they were. And because this paint is all still very wet, I can use that by working into it very lightly to get it to go even more pale or paler, and get more of a sort of ethereal feeling to it. So let's just have a bit of fun. I think that's probably big enough. Something that occurred to me, even though I'm going to fix the sky, is also down this part here. I want to bring these trees and what they're sitting on forward a bit, because I don't want them to look as though they're on the same level as these smaller trees, because that obviously would be completely wrong, because they'd be about 500 feet high. So I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of dark down there to bring the land up to the trees. So this is one plane, then you've got this other plane here with the trees in the background. So it'll resolve any perspective doubts, I suppose. This is definitely in the foreground. There we are. Look at that in the camera, seems okay. Now then, a little bit of adjustment on the camera. Now the reason I've moved down a bit there is because I want a little bit more darkness down the bottom here. Just to pull it to the foreground a little bit, and then I think a suggestion of some kind of line through there. Yeah, I think that'll probably do. So I think I will leave the trees like that. I won't touch the sky near the trees now. I'll go and work up that bit there, which you could see me pointing at, but you couldn't see what I was pointing at. So I'm going to move the camera yet again. Okay, now let's see what we can make of this. At the moment it's pretty flat and boring, so it may stay flat and boring, but I'll work on it with the idea that it shouldn't be. Just check my brushes here. In fact, having said that it's flat and boring, I think I need to put in a dark shadow or two. I mean, I've got some darkness behind these trees. It's not very dark, but I mean, I think it just needs a little bit of a threat up there. Really loose. And then white on a palette knife. And I think we'll just sort of plop it on here, see what happens. A little bit of light catching there. Although that contradicted what I said earlier in the video, I shouldn't be thinking of clouds. I should be thinking of paint, which I am actually, it's just paint. Interesting. The thing I find, and this might sound weird to some people, but the thing about, when I say paint is interesting, every now and then I sort of interject the interesting word, and I know there are people who are saying, what's interesting? That's not interesting. It's the borderline between the dark and the light. That's the bit that's interesting. What happens on, for instance, this bit of cloud here, down there, is of no interest to me. It's just where the two meet and whether I can do something to that transitional space that makes it less than boring. Anything less than boring, I suppose, is a good thing. So there's a less than boring blob. Hope so, anyway. Now, so all I'm going to do is loosely put these bits of white on the painting, and then I'm going to smooth it, and then I think that'll be it. And next time I make a video, I'm going to remember to keep the camera switched on, because it can make a habit of it. It can wake you in the night in a hot sweat. So just putting a little bit of red ochre in the in the white, and I'm just going to put it there. Now there's no plan with this, you know, about where the light is, because I know it'll look okay. The thing about light on clouds, you can either have one definite light source right across there like so, or you can make it sort of jump around, because light in clouds does jump around. Sometimes it can be quite mystifying as to where the sun is, but it doesn't matter. As long as it looks good, try not to worry about it. Right, so now I need a completely unused brush. I thought I had one in my back pocket, but I don't. So here's a completely clean brush, brand new. Okay, let's see what we can do. Apart from get half a badger off my picture. There we go. It's quite a lot of white, so I've got to be mindful of how much I'm pushing around and how much this is actually picking up. Pretty interesting. So when you're doing this, just as I may have mentioned it earlier in the video, but this is the following day, up to the point where I realised that the cloudy sky had suddenly appeared. This is the next day afternoon. So anything that I said yesterday is in yesterday land, and I may not remember it. So my point is, if you get streaks in the sky from these brushes, then you've just got to sort of work at them and just go over them. In other words, if I do that and that makes streaks, I would do this, and then I would go that way, and then, you know, until the streaks disappear. The other thing I was going to say. So there's a streak there, which you probably can't see, but I can. So there's a streak going that way, just here. You may be able to see it above my finger. So to lose that, I just go down over it a few times, and it's pretty well gone. If you use a nylon brush, chances are that you won't have the sort of nice jiggly line of bristles on the top. You'll have a dead clean cut. The problem with those is when you do this, you'll get a line from the brush touching the paint. Because this is feathered, you get a much gentler mark, and in fact almost no mark. Now also something to watch out for is, again I'm checking the camera, you can probably see there's a ridge of paint just there. It's not awfully clear, but when you get a big build-up of paint, just get a palette knife and just go on flat onto it and then just rotate it a bit. And then give it a couple of swipes, and then you'll get rid of the sort of peak of paint. And there's another one here, so I'm going to flatten that a little bit. And often when I do stuff like this, it's always in my mind to be careful what I'm painting in the sky sometimes, because giant pigs will appear, angels, all kinds of stuff. People will see lots and lots of different shapes, and it's a common thing. It's called pareidolia, where we just look for, I suppose, animal and human shapes in trees or in the sky. And I think it's a primeval defense system, so that when primitive man was hunting in the jungle, it kept him on his toes, because he kept thinking he saw something in the trees, and it would up his adrenaline so that he could run or fight. It's just a theory, it may be wrong. So there we are, and I think that is probably it. So you didn't see how I made the original sky, but you saw how I made that one. So that's it. Right, I'm stopping now. And so thanks for being here. If you want to go to a Zoom class, go to my website. There's a link in the box below. If you want to be a patron, don't let me stop you, but don't worry. If you don't, you will be forgiven in time. And what else? Yeah, I am teaching on a one-to-one basis, obviously, because that's what I'm doing right this minute. And the number of spaces is limited. I've only got 3 people this year. This is my second student, Sue. What else? Can you think of anything else?
I like the sky better.
I like this sky better. Yeah, you glad you came now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
If I'd left
sky.
if I'd left that other sky on, you would have written me a bad review. Okay, so I think I'm done. I'm never quite sure whether I'm done, but the thing is, I know when to stop, but I'll probably be tickling this painting for the next few months. So particularly when it's dry, I'll be adding maybe a glaze over the sky in a few places, just to introduce a few more colours. And that's it. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.